a skeletal gallows clawed at the sullen pre-dawn sky. The air, thick with the cloying sweetness that always clung to Auschwitz, hinted at the unthinkable industry that had stained the earth. It was April 1947. Rudolf Höss, a man whose name had become synonymous with mechanized death, walked with measured, almost casual steps toward his own appointed demise, a chillingly banal figure set against the backdrop of monumental horror. He was not a screaming sadist, frothing with ideological fervour. Instead, he was a calculating architect of despair, a man who applied bureaucratic precision to the orchestration of mass murder. Imagine it, 1 million souls funneled through his system, extinguished with the clinical detachment of an assembly line. A man who could, without discernible cognitive dissonance, whistle selections from Wagner while signing orders that condemned families to oblivion. He was a chilling juxtaposition of roles, a figure seemingly ripped from the theatre of the absurd. And at night, behind the sterile whitewashed walls of his house, a stone's throw from the belching chimneys of the crematoriums, he would patiently help his children with their arithmetic, discussing the merits of long division, while the stench of burning flesh clung to the curtains. Imagine the conversations, the everyday domestic dramas played out against the constant symphony of suffering. He inhabited 2 worlds, a world of familial comfort and a world of industrialized horror, a terrifying double life that defies easy categorization. What series of choices, what subtle corruptions of the soul could transform an unremarkable soldier into history's most methodical mass murderer? What twisted logic allowed this seemingly ordinary man to tuck his children into bed, to kiss them good night, before returning to supervise the mechanics of genocide? What form of delayed reckoning, what ultimate karmic justice awaited the man who meticulously designed the machinery of hell? This, then, is the chronicle of an executioner, an attempt to trace the origins of one of history's most chilling figures, an excavation of the psychological landscape that nurtured such profound inhumanity. This is the story of Rudolf Höss, from unremarkable beginnings to architect of annihilation, from dutiful son to master of mechanized murder, a journey into the darkest recesses of the human soul, seeking to understand the incomprehensible. A man of precise, measured steps walked towards his ultimate end, a final, tragic act in a horrifying drama. This is the story of the architect of annihilation. The year was 1900, a seemingly idyllic epoch, bathed in the golden light of pre-war prosperity. Bonn, a prosperous spa town nestled in the rolling hills of southwestern Germany, was the birthplace of Rudolf Höss. He was the only son of Franz Xaver Höss, a stern merchant and former military officer, a man whose character had been forged in the crucible of colonial service in German East Africa. Franz Xaver, deeply rooted in his Catholic faith, harboured a singular ambition for his son, to steer him towards the priesthood, to mould him into a pillar of the church, subject to the strictures and discipline that he, Franz Xaver, so vehemently embraced. The father, a staunch believer in unwavering obedience and absolute adherence to religious dogma, set the course for his son's early life, creating a landscape of rigid expectations and limited personal expression, a landscape where duty and subservience reigned supreme. The atmosphere in the Höss household was one of quiet constraint, a world where individuality was sacrificed at the altar of conformity. Young Rudolf, by nature, inclined towards introversion. An introspective child, he instinctively sought to avoid confrontation and to appease the dominant figure of his father. The intended path was clear, the expectations were set. It was a stifling atmosphere, and the boy developed an acute sense of obedience, coupled with a profound ability to suppress his own desires and instincts. These traits, a predilection for conformity and a suppression of self, were to become deeply ingrained. Foundational characteristics that would define his adult behaviour, making him a chillingly effective instrument in the hands of those who sought to manipulate and control. The death of Franz Xaver in 1914, a seismic event that coincided with the eruption of World War I, irrevocably altered the trajectory of the teenager's life. The war, a ravenous beast, consumed everything in its path, upending social structures, shattering empires, and forever transforming the lives of millions, its impact reverberating even within the confines of the Höss household. Freed from the oppressive paternal pressure to pursue a life in the clergy, Rudolf found himself drawn to the allure of military service, swept up in the rising tide of nationalist fervour that permeated German society. It was a siren song, beckoning him towards a world of order, discipline, and collective purpose. A world that offered a seductive escape from the constraints of his upbringing. At the remarkably tender age of 15, driven by an intoxicating blend of youthful idealism and a desperate need for belonging, he took the audacious step of forging his official documents to enlist in the German army. Initially assigned as a medical assistant tending to the wounded and witnessing the brutal realities of combat firsthand, he was soon thrust into the maelstrom of the Eastern Front, a landscape of unrelenting violence and unimaginable suffering. He participated in harrowing campaigns across Turkey, Palestine, and Iraq, enduring the horrors of trench warfare and the constant threat of death. By the age of 17, he had achieved the rank of non-commissioned officer, an almost unheard-of accomplishment for someone so young, a testament to his unwavering dedication, his capacity for leadership, and his ruthless efficiency in the execution of orders. His services, his unwavering commitment to the war effort, earned him the prestigious first and second-class Iron Crosses, distinctions he would forever carry with an unsettling sense of pride. During these formative years, amidst the chaos and carnage of war, Höss witnessed the systematic brutality inflicted upon civilian populations, a constant exposure to the dehumanization of others, experiences that arguably normalized systematic violence in his developing mind, a profound erosion of his innate empathy. The whispers of the Armenian genocide perpetrated by the Ottoman Turks, stories of mass deportations, systematic executions, and unspeakable atrocities reached even the battlefields of the Eastern Front, further desensitizing young Höss to the consequences of unchecked power and ideological extremism. The German defeat in 1918, a national humiliation that shattered the empire and sowed the seeds of resentment and instability, coupled with the punitive conditions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles, generated deep-seated anger and frustration in the young veteran, a sentiment shared by countless former soldiers who felt betrayed by their leaders and abandoned by their nation. Rudolf Höss, a man whose trajectory was forever shaped by his early life and experiences, a life forever changed. Post-war Germany, a fractured and disillusioned nation, became a fertile breeding ground for extremist movements, attracting those who sought solace in radical ideologies and violent solutions. H, like countless other demobilized veterans, found a sense of purpose and belonging within the ranks of the Freikorps, far-right paramilitary groups fueled by anti-communism, revisionist nationalism, and a deep-seated resentment towards the nascent Weimar Republic. These Freikorps, composed primarily of former soldiers hardened by years of combat, were characterized by their fanatical ideology, their unwavering loyalty to their commanders, and their willingness to employ violence to achieve their political objectives, an ideology built on resentment and revenge. The newly liberated and democratic Weimar Republic, struggling to establish itself amidst economic hardship and political instability, became the target of their relentless attacks, its leaders vilified as traitors, its institutions undermined, and its very existence threatened by the rising tide of extremism. The Höss of his 20s, a young man adrift in a society scarred by war, embraced the violence of the Freikorps as a means of channeling his pent-up anger and frustration, a way of imposing order on a world that seemed to have descended into chaos. He actively participated in brutal operations against communist insurgents in regions such as the Ruhr and Upper Silesia, engaging in street brawls, political assassinations and acts of sabotage. A descent into a world of moral ambiguity and escalating violence. This immersion in political violence, a constant exposure to the rhetoric of hate and the normalization of brutality, gradually radicalized his thinking, drawing him closer to increasingly extreme nationalist circles, an embrace of the seductive simplicity of extremist ideology. In 1922, after attending a fiery speech by Adolf Hitler in Munich, an experience that ignited his latent sense of nationalist fervour, he joined the National Socialist Party, becoming one of its earliest members with the membership number 3240. A defining moment that would seal his fate and irrevocably alter the course of history. Höss's radicalization reached a critical juncture in 1923, when he participated in the brutal murder of Walter Kado, a schoolteacher accused of betraying a German saboteur executed by the French authorities. Alongside Martin Bormann, the future secretary to Hitler, and other Freikorps members, Höss brutally beat Kado to death in a forest near Park, an act of savage violence that crossed a critical threshold, transforming him from a political activist into a cold-blooded killer. This crime, a watershed moment in his descent into darkness, resulted in a 10-year prison sentence, a period of confinement that paradoxically served to further solidify his extremist beliefs. During his imprisonment, surrounded by other political prisoners and immersed in the writings of nationalist and anti-Semitic ideologues, Höss refined his ideological convictions, his hatred deepened, his resolve strengthened. He served only 5 years of his sentence, benefiting from a political amnesty in 1928, a reflection of the growing power and influence of far-right groups in pre-Nazi Germany, a troubling sign of the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Upon his release from prison, a man hardened by violence and steeled in his ideological convictions, Höss sought a semblance of stability, a refuge from the turbulent world of political extremism. He joined the Artemian Gesellschaft, a Völkisch organization promoting a return to rural life and German racial purity, a retreat into an idealized vision of agrarian simplicity and racial purity, an attempt to cleanse himself of the moral stain of his past. It was within this seemingly innocuous organization, amidst the bucolic landscapes and the rhetoric of racial purity, that he encountered two figures who would profoundly shape his future, two individuals who would propel him further down the path of destruction. Heinrich Himmler, the future leader of the SS, a man of chilling ambition and unwavering loyalty to Hitler, recognized in Höss a potential asset, a man of unquestioning obedience and unwavering dedication. And Hedwig Hensel, a woman who shared his Völkisch ideals and his desire for a simple, orderly life, who would become his wife and the mother of his 5 children, a seemingly normal family unit set against the backdrop of unimaginable horror. The seeds of destruction were sown, the stage was set for the rise of the Nazi regime and the implementation of its genocidal agenda. Embracing extremism forever altered his path. The embrace of extremism, the economic crisis of 1929, a global catastrophe that plunged nations into despair and fueled social unrest, provided fertile ground for the rise of Nazism in Germany. Widespread discontent, a growing sense of desperation, and a loss of faith in the established order created an environment ripe for the seductive promises of radical change. When Hitler seized power in 1933, Höss saw an opportunity to serve the nationalist cause once again, a chance to redeem himself, to prove his loyalty to the fatherland, and to contribute to the creation of a new, racially pure German society. In 1934, accepting an invitation from Himmler, he joined the SS with membership number 193.616, a fateful decision that marked the beginning of his career as an operator of the Nazi concentration camp system, an apprentice in Dachau, learning the tools of terror before rising to become the architect of hell at Auschwitz. H's entry into the SS in 1934 coincided with a pivotal moment in the consolidation of the Nazi regime. Hitler, having eliminated all internal opposition after the Night of the Long Knives, began institutionalizing repression through a system of concentration camps, initially targeting political opponents, communists, socialists, and other perceived enemies of the state. Dau, established in March 1933 on the outskirts of Munich, became the organizational model for future Nazi camps, a prototype for the system of terror that would soon engulf Europe. It was here, in the shadow of Munich, that Höss began his apprenticeship as an executive of terror, learning the mechanics of mass incarceration and systematic dehumanization under the tutelage of Theodor Eicke, the architect of the concentration camp system. Eicke, the commander of Dachau since June 1933, implemented a disciplinary regime based on three core principles: systematic terror against prisoners, ideological indoctrination of the SS guards, and ruthless administrative efficiency. He established the camp's internal regulations known as discipline and punishment, which institutionalized cruelty as a method of control, a system designed to break the will of the prisoners, to instill fear and obedience, and to transform ordinary men into instruments of state-sponsored violence. H meticulously absorbed these teachings, observing, learning, and internalizing the principles of terror with chilling efficiency. He started as a Blockführer, responsible for a barracks of prisoners, where he learned to apply collective punishment, sow distrust among inmates to prevent any solidarity, and maintain order through fear and intimidation. A process of gradual desensitization to the suffering of others. His efficiency and his unwavering adherence to Eicke's principles earned him a rapid promotion to Rohrführer, a position where he supervised other Blockführer, organized the dreaded daily roll calls, where prisoners could remain for hours standing in the open air, exposed to the elements, and oversaw the implementation of disciplinary measures. A further escalation of his involvement in the camp's machinery of terror. The brutality at Dau was not arbitrary, but methodical, calculated, and institutionalized. A system of dehumanization designed to strip prisoners of their dignity and their humanity. H internalized that terror must be administered as a rational system, a lesson he would later apply with devastating effect in Auschwitz, a chilling demonstration of the banality of evil. He observed how Eicke transformed young guards into impassive executioners through a combination of ideological indoctrination, militarized camaraderie, and gradual desensitization to the suffering of others, a process of psychological manipulation that blurred the lines between right and wrong, creating a culture of unquestioning obedience and collective responsibility. In 1938, Höss's career took a significant leap forward when he was transferred to the Sachsenhausen camp, located near Berlin, a promotion that reflected his growing reputation within the SS hierarchy. This transfer represented a significant promotion, a testament to his administrative skills and his unwavering commitment to the Nazi cause. He was appointed assistant to the commander Hermann Baranowski, another disciple of Eicke, a man who shared his mentor's ruthlessness and his dedication to the principles of the concentration camp system. Sachsenhausen, built in 1936, incorporated architectural innovations such as its triangular layout, designed to maximize surveillance from a central tower, a panopticon of terror. At this camp, H further refined his administrative skills, honing his ability to manage the camp's logistics, implement new control methods, and oversee the day-to-day operations with military precision. He supervised executions, organized forced labor, and administered the disciplinary regime with chilling efficiency, demonstrating his unwavering commitment to the Nazi ideology and his ability to implement its policies with ruthless effectiveness. A revealing episode of his cruelty occurred during the winter of 1939 to 1940, when he ordered prisoners not assigned to work groups to remain in the open for hours in sub-zero temperatures. a callous disregard for human life that revealed the depths of his dehumanization. Many lacked proper coats, and dozens died of frostbite, their bodies left to rot in the freezing cold as a warning to others. When some attempted to seek refuge in the infirmary, Höss ordered the doors to be closed, a deliberate act of cruelty that condemned countless prisoners to a slow and agonizing death. This incident illustrates his willingness to sacrifice human lives to maintain order and discipline, a chilling example of the dehumanizing effects of the Nazi ideology. H's relationship with Himmler strengthened during these years. The Reichsführer SS saw him as an ideal subordinate, disciplined, methodical, and ideologically committed. A man who could be trusted to carry out the most heinous orders without question. This connection would be decisive for his appointment as commander of Auschwitz in May 1940. A promotion that would propel him to the forefront of the Holocaust, transforming him from an apprentice of terror into the architect of annihilation. He had learned well, learning terror for the future, the learning of terror. On May 1st, 1940, Rudolf Höss assumed command of a new concentration camp, meticulously established on a former Polish military base near the town of Oenim, which the Germans swiftly rechristened Auschwitz. Initially conceived as a detention centre for Polish resistance members, a place to incarcerate political opponents and suppress dissent, no one could have foreseen that under Höss's ruthless direction, this seemingly unremarkable location would metamorphose into the epicentre of the most systematic genocide in recorded history, the beating heart of the Holocaust. The selection of this location was not arbitrary, a calculated decision based on strategic considerations and logistical advantages that Höss recognised with chilling alacrity. Auschwitz offered strategic advantages that Höss recognised immediately. Its geographical position made it ideally suited for the implementation of the final solution. It was situated at a railway junction connecting various regions of Europe, a nexus of transportation that facilitated the efficient movement of prisoners from across the continent. It possessed ample land for expansion, allowing for the construction of new facilities and the creation of a vast complex of camps and sub-camps. It was sufficiently isolated to operate discreetly, minimizing the risk of external scrutiny and maintaining a veil of secrecy around its horrific activities, yet close enough to industrial centres to exploit captive labour, providing a readily available workforce for the German war machine. During his first year as commander, Höss oversaw the adaptation of the old military buildings and the construction of new facilities using forced labour from prisoners, a grim testament to the efficiency with which the Nazis exploited their victims. The original Auschwitz Dutrans could accommodate around 10,000 inmates, primarily Polish political opponents and some Jews from the region, a relatively small-scale operation compared to the horrors that would later unfold. In March 1941, Heinrich Himmler visited Auschwitz and was impressed by H's management, recognizing his administrative skills and his unwavering commitment to the Nazi ideology. He ordered a significant expansion of the camp to house an additional 30,000 prisoners, anticipating an increase in detainees following the imminent invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa. More importantly, during this visit, or in subsequent meetings that summer, Himmler informed H that Auschwitz would be designated as the main centre for implementing the final solution, the plan for the systematic extermination of European Jews, a task of unimaginable horror entrusted to a man who had proven his unwavering loyalty and his chilling efficiency. Höss received this mission with the same bureaucratic efficiency that characterised his entire career. Devoid of emotion, devoid of moral qualms, he simply saw it as another task to be completed, another order to be followed. He did not question the order, he did not express any reservations, he simply accepted it as his duty, a testament to his complete dehumanization. He immediately began planning how to execute it with maximum efficiency. His goal was not just to kill, but to develop an industrial extermination system that could process the largest number of victims with minimal logistical effort, transforming mass murder into a streamlined, efficient process. Höss oversaw the construction of Auschwitz to Birkenau, which began in October 1941 in the nearby village of Bazinka, a task that would consume the resources and the labour of countless prisoners. This second camp, much larger than the original, was specifically designed as a centre for mass extermination, a place where millions of innocent people would be systematically murdered. Its planning reflected an industrial mindset, maximising the processing of victims while minimising resources and personnel, a macabre example of efficiency taken to its most extreme and horrifying conclusion. The methods of murder evolved under Höss's direction, constantly refined and improved to achieve maximum efficiency and minimal emotional impact on the executioners. In September 1941, he experimented with Cyclone B, a cyanide-based pesticide, in the basement of Block 11 at Auschwitz I, a grim experiment that would have devastating consequences for millions of people. Using Soviet prisoners as guinea pigs, he discovered that this gas was more efficient and less traumatic for the executioners than mass shootings or carbon monoxide used in other camps. A chilling example of the detached clinical approach to mass murder. Satisfied with the results, Höss adapted Crematorium 1 at Auschwitz to function as a gas chamber, a conversion that marked a turning point in the history of the Holocaust. However, it quickly became insufficient for the anticipated volume of victims, a stark illustration of the scale of the Nazis' genocidal ambitions. In Birkenau, 4 large extermination facilities were built, each with gas chambers designed to kill up to 2,000 people simultaneously and crematoria to eliminate the bodies, a testament to the industrial scale of the extermination process. The extermination process was refined to reach a chilling industrial efficiency, a macabre ballet of death orchestrated with meticulous precision. Train transports arrived directly at a ramp inside Birkenau, delivering their human cargo to the gates of hell. New arrivals were separated into 2 groups through a quick selection performed by SS doctors, a brutal triage that determined who would live and who would die. Those deemed able to work were temporarily admitted to the camp, their lives spared, at least for a time, so that they could be exploited as slave labour. The rest, elderly people, children, women with babies, the sick or the weak, were sent directly to the gas chambers, their fate sealed the moment they stepped off the train. The victims were told they were going to take showers for hygienic reasons, a cruel deception designed to maintain order and prevent panic. They were instructed to remember where they left their clothes and belongings, creating a false expectation of return, a final, devastating lie that robbed them of any hope. Once inside the chambers, which were hermetically sealed, SS members introduced Cyclone B crystals through openings in the ceiling or walls, unleashing the deadly gas that would extinguish their lives. Death by asphyxiation occurred within about 20 minutes, although the agony could be longer, a horrific final ordeal for the innocent victims. Afterward, the Sonderkommandos, teams of prisoners forced to work in the extermination facilities, removed the bodies, a macabre task that condemned them to a life of unimaginable horror. They extracted valuables such as gold teeth and proceeded to incinerate the bodies in the crematory ovens, a final act of dehumanization that erased any trace of their existence. When the incineration capacity proved insufficient, as during the mass deportation of Hungarian Jews in 1944, the bodies were burned in large open-air pits, a gruesome spectacle that filled the air with the stench of burning flesh. Höss managed this death system with the precision of an industrial administrator, overseeing every detail, optimizing procedures, and resolving logistical problems with chilling detachment. In his own words recorded in his autobiography, the extermination process in Auschwitz took the following form. The Jews destined for extermination were taken as quietly as possible to the crematoria. The men were separated from the women and children. They were taken to the gas chamber, which was spacious and gave the impression of a shower room. First the women with the children entered, followed by the men, always in smaller numbers. Everything took place in absolute calm. Many times the people knew they were going to be gassed. In November 1943, Höss was temporarily relieved of his command of Auschwitz after an extramarital affair with a political prisoner was revealed, a seemingly trivial transgression compared to the horrors he had overseen, but a violation of the SS Code of Conduct. This episode, seemingly contradictory to his strict self-discipline, reveals the complexities of a man who could simultaneously participate in the largest genocide in history while harbouring ordinary human weaknesses. A chilling reminder that even the most monstrous individuals are still, in some ways, human. The architect of death, the industrialization of death. In the spring of 1944, as the tide of war turned decisively against Germany and the spectre of defeat loomed large on the horizon, the Nazi leadership embarked on a frenzied acceleration of the Jewish extermination, a final, desperate attempt to complete their genocidal agenda before the inevitable collapse of the Third Reich. This final, desperate phase of the Holocaust primarily targeted the Jewish community of Hungary, which had remained relatively intact until then, a community that represented one of the last major concentrations of Jews in Nazi-occupied Europe. To carry out this task, Rudolf Höss, the former commander of Auschwitz, was summoned once again. His expertise in mass murder deemed essential for the efficient extermination of the Hungarian Jews. Temporarily removed from his command due to personal issues since 1943, Höss was recognised for his cold efficiency in handling large-scale genocidal operations, a proven master of mechanised death. Now, in the midst of a military crisis, his experience was deemed indispensable to execute the largest and fastest mass killing organised by the Nazi regime, a final, desperate act of barbarity. On March 19, 1944, Germany occupied Hungary through Operation Margaret, a blatant violation of Hungarian sovereignty that paved the way for the systematic persecution and extermination of its Jewish population. Although Hungary had been an Axis ally since 1941, its leader Miklo Horthy had, until then, resisted the mass deportation of approximately 800,000 Hungarian Jews, a stance that had provided them with a measure of protection from the horrors of the Holocaust. This community represented about 5% of the country's total population and was a fundamental part of its cultural and economic life, a vibrant and integral part of Hungarian society. With the arrival of the Germans, this situation changed radically. The forces of darkness descended upon Hungary, unleashing a wave of persecution and violence that would forever scar the nation. Immediately, the Nazis installed a collaborationist government led by Domstöger and began persecuting the Jews, implementing a series of discriminatory measures designed to isolate, humiliate, and ultimately destroy them. They were forced to wear the yellow star, a badge of shame that marked them as outcasts from society. Their property was confiscated, their businesses seized, and their homes looted. They were imprisoned in overcrowded makeshift ghettos, confined to squalid conditions, deprived of food and medical care, and subjected to constant harassment and abuse. Adolf Eichmann, the logistical architect of the deportations, quickly arrived in Budapest at the head of the so-called Sonderkommando Eichmann, a special unit specifically responsible for the logistics of the Jewish extermination. The operation was officially named Action Höss, a direct and unusual reference to Höss himself, a chilling testament to his central role in the extermination process. He returned to Auschwitz on May 8, 1944, with the specific mission, personally entrusted by Heinrich Himmler, to exterminate the Hungarian Jews as quickly as possible, a task he accepted with his usual chilling efficiency. Although he did not formally regain the position of overall commander, Höss took on a special role as Himmler's planetary, controlling every operational and logistical aspect of the extermination. A macabre puppet master, orchestrating the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent people. Over the next few months, Auschwitz underwent a radical transformation in operational terms, geared towards the single-minded goal of exterminating the Hungarian Jews as rapidly as possible. Between May and July of 1944, approximately 430,000 Jews were transported to Auschwitz on more than 140 trains, a relentless stream of human cargo arriving at the gates of hell. The operation required precise coordination between German and Hungarian authorities, a testament to the bureaucratic efficiency of the Nazi killing machine. Even essential war trains were diverted to Auschwitz, clearly showing the ideological priority given to extermination, a chilling demonstration that the extermination of the Jews was deemed more important than the war effort itself. To further increase efficiency, Höss ordered critical improvements to the camp's infrastructure, transforming Auschwitz into a highly efficient death factory. A new railway platform was built at Birkenau, known as the Birkenau ramp, located directly in front of the gas chambers, an optimization that dramatically reduced the time between the victims' arrival and their execution. Auschwitz, in this way, literally functioned as a death production line, a conveyor belt of death that processed its victims with terrifying speed and efficiency. The Nazi death machine reached its maximum capacity during this period, operating at a level of intensity that defied comprehension. On the most intense days, the camp processed up to 12,000 victims daily. Unprecedented figures in the history of the Holocaust, a chilling demonstration of the industrial scale of the extermination process. Selections were made with mechanical speed and brutality, the fate of each individual determined in a matter of seconds. SS doctors like Yosef Mengele decided with simple gestures who would temporarily live as a slave and who would die immediately. A macabre game of chance played with human lives. Only between 10% and 30% survived temporarily, spared for a short time to be exploited as slave labour, before eventually succumbing to exhaustion, disease, or starvation. The rest, especially children, the elderly, and women with young children, were sent directly to the gas chambers without being registered, their names erased from the world, their existence denied. The pace of extermination soon exceeded the technical capacity of the 4 crematoria at Birkenau, overwhelming the camp's capacity to dispose of the bodies. Originally designed to incinerate around 4,400 corpses daily, during Action Höss, this number was frequently doubled, pushing the crematoria to their breaking point. Faced with this overload, Höss authorized mass cremation outdoors, a gruesome measure that further desecrated the memory of the victims. Huge pits were dug in the forest near the camp where thousands of bodies were burned daily in giant peas fueled by wood and human fat collected from the victims themselves. A horrific spectacle that filled the air with the stench of burning flesh. To speed up the process, chemical accelerants like methanol were used, adding to the environmental devastation and the pervasive sense of horror. Those in charge of handling the bodies were Jewish prisoners organized into special units known as S-commandos, men forced to participate in the extermination process under the constant threat of death. These men lived under unimaginable psychological pressure, knowing they would be killed periodically to preserve the secrecy of the operations, their lives a living hell. The atmosphere at Auschwitz during those months constantly evoked infernal visions, a landscape of death and despair that defied description. Black smoke rose continuously toward the sky, visible from miles away, a constant reminder of the horrors that were unfolding within the camp's walls. The smell of burnt flesh permeated every corner of the camp and its surroundings, a sickening odour that clung to everything and everyone. Testimonies from survivors offer chilling descriptions, recounting the unimaginable horrors they witnessed and the psychological scars they carry to this day. Future Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel, deported from Hungary in May 1944, described in his book Night the emotional devastation he felt witnessing the mass burning of small children, a scene that seemed surreal and unimaginable, a testament to the depths of human depravity. Meanwhile, Rudolf Weber, who had escaped the camp just before the operation, highlighted how all of Auschwitz was reorganized exclusively to exterminate Hungarian Jews as quickly as possible, a chilling confirmation of the single-minded focus of the Nazi killing machine. Historian Raoul Hilberg later described this operation as the culmination of an evolutionary process in which death had been completely mechanized, a chillingly accurate assessment of the industrialization of genocide. Under Höss's personal direction, Auschwitz became a true extermination factory, combining industrial efficiency with ideological cruelty, a macabre masterpiece of engineering and inhumanity. The most striking aspect of this operation was the historical context in which it occurred. With the Allies closing in on Germany from both east and west, the resources invested in this operation could have been used on the Eastern Front, where the Soviet threat was imminent. This fact clearly demonstrated that for the Nazi hierarchy, exterminating the Jews was as much of a priority as military victory itself, a chilling testament to the power of ideology to override even the most basic considerations of self-preservation. However, the operation ended abruptly in early July 1944, brought to a halt by a combination of external pressure and internal political manoeuvring. The Hungarian regent Miklo Horthy, partially informed about the fatal fate of the deportee through the famous Verba-Wetzlar report created by two Auschwitz escapees, ordered the cessation of deportations under international diplomatic pressure, particularly from Sweden and the Vatican, a rare moment of resistance that saved the lives of thousands of Hungarian Jews. In just 56 days, this last major Nazi operation killed more people than the populations of major European cities like Amsterdam or Naples at the time, a chilling statistic that underscores the scale of the Holocaust. Despite this horror, around 200,000 Jews remained in Budapest, whose deportation was suspended for political reasons, their lives hanging in the balance. However, many of them would perish months later under the Hungarian fascist regime of the Iraq Cross, supported by Germany, a tragic end to their long ordeal. After completing his macabre mission, Höss left Auschwitz in August 1944 to take a higher bureaucratic position in the Central Concentration Camp Administration in Oranienburg near Berlin, a promotion that reflected his continued standing within the SS hierarchy. From there, he continued managing administrative aspects of the Nazi system until the end of the war, including the terrible death marches, which claimed tens of thousands of additional lives in the final months of the conflict. A chilling example of the Nazi regime's continued commitment to genocide, even as it faced imminent defeat. In December 1944, Höss returned one last time to Auschwitz to inspect the evacuation of the camp in the face of the Soviet advance, a final visit to the site of his greatest crime. His main concern was the elimination of evidence and compromising documents rather than the fate of the thousands of prisoners who would be forced to march westward under inhuman conditions, a chilling display of his callous disregard for human life. As the Third Reich crumbled under the inexorable advance of Allied forces in the spring of 1945, senior Nazi officials faced an undeniable reality. The reckoning was fast approaching. Total collapse was imminent, and with it accountability for the crimes committed over 12 years of National Socialist rule. A day of judgment was soon to come. The commander of Auschwitz, how Rudolf Höss was captured, was soon to be brought to justice. In these final chaotic days as Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker on April 30th, and the Allied armies penetrated deep into German territory, Rudolf Höss clearly understood that his name was among the most sought-after war criminals by the victors. His crimes would not go unpunished. The man who had meticulously overseen the largest death machine in history for years now had to plan his own survival. He must now face the consequences of his choices. Following instructions provided by Heinrich Himmler during their last meeting in March 1945, Höss received false documents identifying him as Friedrich Lang, a sailor in the Marine German Navy, a new identity designed to conceal his true past. He was advised to avoid large cities, stay away from his family, which could be under surveillance, and seek work in isolated rural areas, ideally on farms, where he could live in relative anonymity. a strategy designed to evade capture and delay the inevitable. It is notable that these instructions from Himmler for evasion were part of a broader plan for what Nazi leaders envisioned as a future Fourth Reich, a chilling reminder of the enduring power of Nazi ideology. According to later testimonies, Himmler had instructed selected SS members to discreetly integrate into post-war German society, maintain contacts, and wait for the right moment to reorganize, possibly when the Western powers and the Soviet Union entered into conflict. A long-term strategy for the survival and resurgence of Nazism. This strategy, known as the Werewolf Organization or Odessa Organization, never materialized as its creators envisioned, but it did facilitate the escape and hiding of numerous Nazi criminals, providing them with the resources and the networks to evade justice for years to come. Höss followed these instructions to the letter, determined to escape justice and protect himself from the consequences of his actions. After the formal surrender of Germany on May 8, 1945, he moved north to the Schleswig-Holstein region near the Danish border, a remote and sparsely populated area that offered a degree of anonymity. This geographical choice was no accident. The area, predominantly rural, was relatively isolated, and in the chaotic months following the surrender, was crowded with refugees, demobilized soldiers, and displaced people seeking to rebuild their lives, providing the perfect camouflage for a fugitive, a sea of anonymity in which to hide. For almost a year, Höss managed to evade capture, a significantly longer period than many other Nazi leaders of his rank under the name Franz Lang, not Friedrich as some erroneous accounts suggest, successfully assuming his new identity and blending into the post-war landscape. He worked as an agricultural labourer on a farm near Gottrupel in the vicinity of Flensburg, just a few kilometres from the Danish border, toiling in the fields alongside other displaced Germans, living a simple and unassuming life. His inconspicuous appearance, a middle-aged, quiet and hard-working man, allowed him to blend in among thousands of Germans displaced by the war, living in Spartan conditions and deliberately maintaining a low profile, effectively erasing his former identity and concealing his true nature. However, international justice, still being organised in the post-war world, was developing increasingly sophisticated mechanisms to locate and prosecute those responsible for the Holocaust and other war crimes. The wheels of justice were turning, slowly but surely. The creation of the Nuremberg Military Tribunal in August 1945 and the start of its proceedings in November of that year marked a key moment in this process, establishing a legal framework for the prosecution of Nazi war criminals. The testimonies and evidence presented at Nuremberg gradually revealed the full extent of the Nazi concentration camp system, placing Auschwitz and its former commander at the centre of attention.